So now, Grayson, we obviously met on LinkedIn, but I'm not really sure how, but it's funny how the universe has a way of bringing you together, isn't it? And when we had a conversation, it was just, we are so on the same page. And I loved it because most people who've been in the corporate world have a different transactional view of collaboration, but not Grayson. But let me just tell you briefly, the bio, I didn't know this when I invited him to come here, and I've read it and I've gone, wow, thank you so much for coming. But let me just give you an idea. Grayson helps executives and their teams transform their collaborative leadership performance throughout the US and internationally. Hurrah, we need that. Early in his career, Grayson was CEO of Independent Learning Schools, Inc., a nationally acclaimed multi-campus private school system in San Francisco Bay Area that was cited as a model school for the future in Esquire magazine. Following this, he served as a professional court-appointed mediator. How important are they? Specializing in resolution of complex multi-party litigations while also teaching alternative conflict resolution skills. If only they taught that at school, that's all I can say. Hopefully in the free schools, they're doing that in Grayson's schools. Grayson has founded, led and served on numerous non-profit boards and associations, including most recently Petaluma Bounty, which was recognized with the Leadership and Sustainability Award by the California State Senate and State Assembly. So he's interested in sustainability as well. What's not to love? You still with me? Grayson is a certified ontological coach and also serves as the worldwide training and certification leader for facilitators of the Samurai Game, an internationally acclaimed leadership and team building simulation created by author George Leonard. Grayson holds a 6th-degree black belt in Aikido. I can't say it now, I'm funny. Aikido, and is a senior instructor at 2 Rock Aikido in Petaluma. He also studies Tai Chi and is a longtime practitioner of Qigong and other mind-body disciplines. He lives in Sonoma County, California. So I'm not very good at reading, but I do. I can talk eventually. So I'm handing over to Grayson now, and he's going to talk about the body of collaboration. Thank you for coming, Grayson. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Jill. I really appreciate the invitation and good to be with you all here today. So I want to thank you, Alessandro, for that opening practice. It's actually something, I do something very similar when I work with groups in the corporate world and anywhere else. I like to start our meetings off in a similar fashion. So at the risk of undoing some of that great work we all just did with Alessandro, I want to ask you all to do something. I want you to lift your shoulders up to your ears and just hold them here for a second. And hopefully you have a screen full of people in front of you doing something similar, holding their shoulders up to the ears. I want you to just look around. And as you look at all of these people with their shoulders up by their ears, I want you to notice your own self. Notice your own body, notice your mind, notice your feelings. Let it go, let the shoulders drop. Let the breath out if you've been holding it. And now what I want to do is I want to ask you to do something else. I want you to just listen to me. I'm going to read a passage and just listen to me. This is from a book. I'll tell you about the book in a minute. It will take the average reader of this book about 10,000 breaths to read from here to the end of the book. If I've done my job correctly, starting now, with every breath you take, you'll have a deeper understanding of breathing and how best to do it 20 times a minute, 10 times through the mouth, nose, tracheotomy, or breathing tube. It's not all the same. How we breathe really matters. Okay, notice what just happened as you were listening to me. I was holding my breath. I was reading that paragraph with just one breath, and I'm guessing that you may have noticed some changes as you were listening to me holding my breath. I'm guessing many of you started holding your breath. And obviously not because I asked you to or told you to, it's just what we do. We have these bodies, and these bodies have exquisite, finely tuned nervous systems. And we're constantly picking up on the cues and the signals from the people around us and the world around us. And it's nothing we're even doing consciously necessarily. It just happens. So everywhere we go with our body. Everything we do in a body. So let's just take a moment after that little exercise and reconnect with your feet on the floor. Take a couple of easy breaths in through the nose, out through the nose, and reset. Reset the nervous system here. So as Jill said, I want to talk to you about the body of collaboration, the role of the body when we collaborate. And I want to start with an observation that dawned on me through the years of working with executives in workshops in many different countries and cultures. And what I realized is that everybody knows what works in collaboration. And the list of things that people cite when I ask them to list what works around the world is really pretty darn similar. And it surprised me how similar it was. It also surprised me that everybody knows this stuff. And yet, as we see in the workshops that I do with these people, they come to realize that although they know what works in organizational collaboration, they don't always do what works. And I think this is a really interesting, fascinating phenomenon. So the other interesting thing is that they often think they do know that they are doing what works. They think they're doing the right things when they're in a tough collaboration. And then they realize when they really look closely at their own conversations that they were not doing those things that work. And they sometimes think that other people are doing things that they know work, and they're not. It's easy to see in other people, but it's not so easy to see in ourselves. So somehow we don't always recognize what we're doing while we're doing it. And this is actually an important principle in terms of collaboration for me, but also for the role of the body. So what does it mean that we collaborate with our bodies? Lawrence Gonzalez, the author of Everyday Survival and Deep Survival and many other articles and books, he wrote that the most remarkable discovery of modern neuroscience is that the body controls the mind as much as the brain controls the body. And I would actually say that even this is a false dichotomy. To separate the body and the mind in the first place kind of misses the point that they're just different aspects of the same whole that we each are. We are a mind, we're a body. It's difficult, if not impossible, to really separate them out. So when I work with teams and individuals, the assumption is usually that, well, collaboration is something we do with our heads. It involves our thinking. Of course, we speak, we listen, we have conversations, and all of that's true. Those are the key activities involved in conversation, collaboration, speaking, listening, thinking. But these activities, they don't just magically happen. They happen in a body. So what is it that goes on in the body? We never just collaborate with our heads. So here's some of the things that we do in the body. We perceive the world around us. We perceive the world right in front of us, the people on the screen in front of us, sitting across the table, sitting right next to us. We react to these perceptions. We react often instantly and physiologically, even before the interpreting part of our brain kicks in, gets involved. We behave, we respond reflexively with conditioned reactions. And then we interpret our perception through our biological and cognitive filters and biases. We experience emotions in the body. And we act upon all of these interpretations and emotions through, again, the body, through our tone of voice, our posture, gestures, movement, muscle tone, energetic presence. So the body is inescapable, and it is our primary, although often invisible, point of reference for relating to the world and the people in it. And we can see this when we look at metaphors. So here are just a few metaphors, and I'm sure they'll be familiar to you. He's uptight. I'm feeling down. Chill out, will you? Lighten up. This is a real pain in the neck. Well, that meeting really went sideways. Don't be so cold. Things are heating up. I'm all wound up. So just some examples. We could fill pages with the different metaphors that we use. And if you think about them, they all have to do with some bodily experience. We've all experienced tightness in our bodies, in other things around us, up, down, sideways, temperature, pains. All of these things are bodily phenomena that we experience as human beings. And it's hard to imagine a metaphor that does not tether back somehow to the body. So I want to give you a brief bit of background, my own background, and how I kind of came to realize the importance of the body. I was never a jock at school. I actually had no interest in organized team sports. I played tennis, but I don't think I ever even went to a game in school. I was afraid of American football. It just wasn't interested in basketball. And in the US in the 70s, soccer had not yet been invented. It did not even exist as a thing. It was American football and that was it. And now, of course, it's completely different. When I was 17, I discovered dance. I'd never really seen it before. And I was mesmerized to the point of asking one of the dancers. I worked in a theater at night in San Francisco. And I asked one of the dancers, how can I start learning that? So I began studying ballet and modern. I was actually a professional dancer for 8 years until I was about 25. And then at 25, I had an abrupt change in my life. I moved back to California. I was living in New York, working in New York as a dancer. And my father was having some serious health issues. I moved back to be with him, and he passed away 6 weeks later. And he left me his private school system in the Bay Area. And I had no experience running an organization, much less an educational organization. But I felt compelled. I felt like I had to run it because the hundreds of kids and their parents for whom the school was really a last resort. It was a very innovative school for kids who didn't fit into regular school. So I spent the next 6 years running these schools, and it was an intense and often really overwhelming experience. Simultaneously, I had discovered the martial art of Aikido, which sort of replaced my dance, and began training 7 days a week. But here was my realization as I was those first few years running the schools. I was younger. I was less experienced than almost all of my faculty and staff. I didn't know what I was doing. I really was just clueless. I only had one thing going for myself. Looking back, I now see that. And that one thing is what got me through those first few years while I was just, floundering. I knew how to stand up straight. That was all I had going for me. I was a pretty quick learner, but I knew how to stand up straight. I'd learned that as a dancer. And although I was clueless in almost every other respect, somehow the way I stood, walked, carried myself, I later heard seemed to convey confidence. We might call it presence or something like that. I didn't realize at the time, of course, I was just doing the only thing I could do. But as I began studying later on, I began studying collaborative performance. I realized that presence is a bodily phenomenon. It's an expression of our posture, our energy, our movement, our connection to the ground, to our length, our depth, our width as people and bodies. And it's also something we can practice. We can cultivate through practice. Aikido really helped deepen this understanding for me. And I sometimes call Aikido the art of collaboration. The principles and philosophy are different than those in most other martial arts. It's not about winning. There are no tournaments. And it's not simply about protecting yourself against an attacker or an opponent. It's also about protecting the attacker as well as yourself. And that's really a very different, and if you think about it, it's a pretty ambitious ideal, much easier to think about and philosophize about than to actually do. I've been studying for close to 40 years, teaching for about 35 of those years, Aikido, and I'm still working on it, still learning, still floundering at times. So everything we do in a body. When we're collaborating, we're listening in a body, we're speaking in a body. And I have some counterintuitive principles that I introduce to groups when I first start working with them. One of them is practice physically to improve yourself mentally, and practice mentally to improve yourself physically. And if you look at what elite athletes or performers, dancers, musicians do, they're not just working with their bodies, they're working with their minds. It is a deeply intellectual pursuit to be a high-performing athlete or performer of any type. And that's really not too different than starting your own business, leading a team, working under hard deadlines, working with people who you don't share a lot of background with, who can be very different, have different values, different interests. So there are some primary challenges that I see to good collaboration, and I'll share two of them that have to do with the body. First is that lack of awareness of what we're actually doing. And I mentioned this at the beginning, that it's easy to notice what other people are doing, especially what they're maybe doing badly from our perspective, or what they're not doing. But it's a lot harder to be aware of what we're doing, our posture, our breath, our gesture, our spatial orientation, the internal sensations we're experiencing as we're in a meeting, having an important conversation. And the reason for this is a lot of what we do is habitual. It's invisible to us because it's just automatic. And to the extent that we're not aware of what we're doing, it's very difficult to intervene and to change what we're doing, whether it's working or not. If we're not aware of it, difficult to change it. So becoming more aware of what we're doing in our bodies is a really important way to begin to change what we're doing and to improve our performance in any domain, particularly in collaboration. So that's one point, is awareness matters. The second is that one of the challenges to good collaboration, especially under challenging circumstances, is that our nervous system makes it difficult to tolerate differences. So when things are going well, when we're with people who are like us, or when we're just in a flow for whatever reason, we all collaborate just fine. We don't really need a whole lot more than what we do usually. It's when we're being around people that are very different from us, dealing with tough challenges, feeling pressure, heated emotions, when there's a lot of dissent or conflict in the conversation. When things heat up, that's when our nervous system can sometimes get in our way, let's say, because we're not used to tolerating the discomfort of these differences. So what we do is our nervous system sort of pushes us to shut down, to distract, to avoid difficult conversations. And we see this in meetings all over the place. This is one of the big reasons why I get called in to work with executive teams, leadership teams, is They don't know how to have the important conversations that they really need to have. And from my perspective, it's not that they don't want to, or they don't know what they need to talk about, is they don't know how to actually engage in the conversation without getting all over each other, without doing things that actually shut each other down without even intending it. So we never just collaborate with our heads. We're always collaborating with our bodies, even when we're engaged in very highly cerebral analytical activities. We're doing it in a body. So let's just talk about tension for a moment. I want you to make a fist, please. Either hand, just make a fist and really hold it. Squeeze that fist. Now, having a fist like this is good for a lot of things. You can punch someone, you can knock on doors, you can pound sand, you can do all sorts of things. But the fist, you can relax your fist now. Let it go. You can move the fingers. But this fist is not good for a lot of other things, like writing or eating or changing your baby's diapers, cooking, stroking your lover's face. Using a keyboard doesn't work so well with a fist. That when those muscles are tightened up, they're limited. And it's the same for tense bodies. Tension is important. We need to be able to tense our muscles. That's how we actually use them. We fire the contracting muscles, and that's how we move our bodies and accomplish things. But the problem is we often retain more tension than we need. And this is certainly true in any physical endeavor. When you look at elite athletes or performers, they're constantly relaxed. And they only fire those muscles when they absolutely need them. And then as soon as they're done with that effort, they return to a relaxed state. And this is optimal performance. Really similar. It's true in sports, martial arts, dancing, hiking. We only need what we need, but our bodies that are chronically tense often use a lot more effort and they get in our way. Similar in any kind of organizational collaboration or interaction, or interpersonal as well. So of course, I'm speaking from an organizational perspective, but all of these things apply just as well interpersonally with our friends and family. So let me give you some examples of how I work with teams and individuals in my coaching practice, how I work with them in the body. Oftentimes, I mentioned that at the beginning of meetings, I introduced practices similar to what Alessandro did with you. Gentle breathing practices, meditation, mindfulness practices. I mix it up sometimes, focusing more on just body scanning, body awareness, breathing practices. I like to get people moving when I can. So one of the things that I insist upon when I work with people, with groups, is I try and get us into open rooms without a lot of furniture and just have the chairs arranged in a circle. And there are some good reasons for this. One is simply it's the only way you can actually look around at everybody and see everybody in your meeting without having to crane necks. And also, I don't like these big items, physical items sitting between us when we're in a meeting. Even if it's a beautiful mahogany conference table, very expensive, I don't think it actually helps the collaboration to have it between me and the people on the other side. I like to have frequent breaks. I like a lot of natural light. I like to encourage people to stand during meetings, not just sit to move around. And I'll introduce gentle movement sequences. And these are based on Aikido usually. But there are a lot of different simple practices that I introduce. And when I do them, I call them performance practices because they help us perform better. And one of the important things that I talk about when I work with groups about doing bodily practices is that it's not about the performance. It's not about how you look or doing it right. It's about noticing what you're doing while you're doing it. It's just about awareness. Again, the more aware we can be of what we're doing and what's happening in our body, the more we can calm ourselves down when we start to feel ourselves getting amped up, the more we can modulate our tone of voice, our breath. And all of that affects how people listen to us and also how we are able to listen to and absorb what the people around us are saying. Sometimes I'll do some simple exercise from the Filipino martial arts, teaching people how to gently strike one another and then absorb that strike in a back and forth sequence that's kind of meditative when you get into it. Or a simple practice, push hands practice from Tai Chi. I'm always really careful to let folks know that they are the authorities of their own body, that I'm not the authority. They have to take care of themselves. And it makes a big difference. It's a great way to bring people together very quickly. I've had people, executives, tell me that they have repeated some of the exercises we did before important speeches or negotiations, and it makes a huge difference. So whatever we do in a body, and in any collaboration we're working in, regardless of the context, I think it really helps. It'll only strengthen our collaboration to recognize that we're all human beings in bodies, listening, speaking, thinking, feeling, sensing, and that the more we can acknowledge that and support everybody being in the body, the more likely we are to be able to actually stay present and engaged with each other and do good work together. So that's my little introduction to the body of collaboration, and I appreciate your presence here with me and the opportunity to share with you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Grayson. That has been absolutely mind-bending from the point of view that I often talk about be, do, have, and who you are being, but the physicality of what you are talking about just makes such sense, because it's the same as if there is stress in your body and that doesn't get released in any way, that ultimately creates an illness or a disease, dis-ease within your body. And it's the same for the conversation that you're having. If your body is in dis-ease and under stress, the conversation, how does it have a hope in hell of coming out to be present at that time as you're talking to that person? So many connotations are going through my mind now. This is brilliant. You have a question, don't you, for everybody to ponder as we go into breakout rooms. We have about 20 minutes. Would you like to share what that question is? Do you have it in front of you, or do you want me to share it?
I do have it in front of me, yes. So here's the question. I want you to think of a challenging interaction that you've had recently in any context, business, personal, or it could be from the past. It could be something you're still engaged in and trying to work through. And I want you to take a moment and see what you remember or notice about your body in this challenging interaction, difficult conversation, perhaps. And I'm going to give you 3 things to pay attention to. And are we going to be able to put this on a chat or a
yes,
show?
I will. We'll add those once we've.
I've already put the question on the chat.
Great. Okay, so you don't need to memorize this. Just notice your energy. How would you describe the quality of your energy? Are you amped up, nervous, anxious, tense, or relaxed, easy, fluid, receptive? Those are just some words. You can come up with your own words. So energy, posture. How would you describe and experience the posture in this situation? Maybe contained, tight, small, protective, or expansive, soft, or open. Again, just some examples to get you started. So we have energy, posture, and the third area to pay attention to is the breath. How would you describe this breath? The quality of the breathing, slow, full, easy, or perhaps fast, shallow, choppy. Again, whatever you experience, that's what you work with. And simply notice it and share with each other what happens with you. We each have our own bodily signature when we're under pressure. It's not the same for everybody, although we all share similar nervous systems and similar things happen, but it's a little different for each of us. So that's the first part of the question, is just notice what happens under pressure for you. And then just keep in mind, entertain the possibility that your body has some influence over your thinking, over what you say and how you listen. And if you were to expand your capacity to be present and engaged in a relaxed, open body, what would be different in this interaction? And what might you do to help bring that about more of the time? So that'll get you started. There's a little bit more detail in the chat.
Okay, we
And
will
way to break it.
send over the last few bits in a moment. I'm going to put everybody into the rooms. There will be a member of Collaboration Global that will keep an eye on what's going on in the room. So make sure everybody gets a chance to have something to say. Don't let one person dominate, as is the rules of our game. Also, if you are thinking of a particular incident that's causing you to have these emotions and this body shift, and you can feel the tension in your body, you don't have to tell anybody what the incident is about. That isn't the relevance. You don't have to tell the story of what your problem is. You can if you want to, keep it very short, just the bare bones, if that gives a little bit of release for you to do that, but you don't actually have to. But what you can do is describe, when I think about this particular incident that happened 10 years ago, or last week, or this morning, this is how I feel, and then kind of describe the physicality of how you are feeling. And then share that with each other. And then please ask the question of each other, are you aware of this? Were you aware of this beforehand? How would you deal with it? How do you deal with it? And can you see a little epiphany moment of like, right, if that happens again, or if I go back and talk to that person, I'm going to be able to make a difference and alter how my breathing is, how I view things, and get in a relaxed state before the conversation starts. There are so many permutations of this. So I'm going to open the rooms now. If you're a Collaboration Global member, could you make sure you've got CG in front of your name for me as well? And you've got 20 minutes, so you've got plenty of time to have a really good conversation and just see if we can transform our way of being to have different conversations with these people that we've had conversations with in the past. This could be phenomenal. Okay, I'll see you on the other side.